On this video, we disassemble the Soviet vintage synthesizer Electronika M25. We clean and vacuum the synthesizer. We assemble the synthesizer. We repair the 16th register. Repairing the modulator. Rechanging the Soviet microcircuit to a modern one. We change the output connectors 5-DIN to modern jack. Measuring instruments and parts list. This is how the repaired Electronika synthesizer sounds EM25. Hi friends, I want to tell you about my experience in repairing an analog vintage Soviet synthesizer, the Electronika EM25. When I turned it on, it sounded like this. A strong background of 50 Hz is heard, and the timbre of wind instruments does not work. A link to this diagram is found in the description below the video. We disassemble the synthesizer. The look of this synthesizer is a bit like the Roland Juno 6. We see old Soviet capacitors on the power supply. Disassemble the power supply and replace the capacitors. We disassemble the synthesizer further. At the same time, we clean and vacuum a vintage analog synthesizer. We replace all electrolytic capacitors. We replace screws and bolts with modern ones. We make devices to make it easier to return the bolts to their place. We assemble the synthesizer. We check the work. The background is gone, but only a few notes sound in the 16th register. The third switch had a poorly soldered contact. After repairing the switch, the third wind tone was earned. To make the 16th register, need to understand how the synthesizer works. The inputs of two microcircuits, KR1012GP1 and KR1012GP2, simultaneously receive a signal with a frequency of 1.06295 Hz. The first microcircuit is responsible for the notes do sharp, re sharp, mi sharp, fa. The second is responsible for fa sharp, sol sharp, la sharp, and si. Another microcircuit is connected to each note at the outputs of which registers are created. When we press the right note, the register is opened using its transistor. For example, sol sharp on the second octave did not sound on this synthesizer. If we look at the circuit, it's a VT10 transistor. Let's replace transistor KT315 with transistor BC547. We see that the outputs of the transistor are different. We put an insulator on the middle leg. I use the old wire from the twisted pair as an insulator. For the outputs to coincide, you need to cross the legs on the transistor BC547. Let's go back to our 16th register. The 16th register, unlike others, works differently. It is monaural, and if you press several keys at the same time, only the lowest one will sound. This is because each note of the 16th register passes through a resistor. That is, the lower the note, the lower the resistance the signal passes through. And if some note does not sound because of the break, then the rest of the notes that are higher in tone will not sound. This is what happened with me. Due to the break of the track, the notes of the 16th register do not sound all that is higher than the note of mi. After track 16 was restored, the register sounded. So, the 16th register is working. But the modulator on the tone of the winds does not work. We get to the modulator board. Along with silicone machine oil. We spray on potentiometers. And we change the K157UD2 chip to K157UD3. The modulator now works and the LED flashes. Next, I decided to replace most of the old Soviet microcircuits. And using the example of one microcircuit, I decided to show how I do it. Let's replace this chip. Let's flux the contacts of the old microcircuit. Let's free the old microcircuit from solder. Remove the old chip from the board. Let's put a seat for the microcircuit. We smear the landing place with flux. Solder the seat. Insert the chip. Replace the Soviet 5-DIN output connectors with modern jack. Unscrew the old connectors. Old bolts and nuts are still useful to us. We solder the old plugs. We will use them for new ones. Then we make such a device. With a hacksaw, cut off the attachment eye from the old connectors. Solder the wires. We assemble the connector. Change old connectors to new ones. This is how the new connectors look like. And at the end, I want to show the device that replaced my oscilloscope. Especially for this device, I made a probe. How to make such a probe is on my video channel. It is very convenient to use this probe. This is a scheme of parts for which you can change Soviet parts. Thanks for watching.